So the story of you avoiding an ambush in 1970 was interesting enough, but a couple days ago you elaborated on it, and the listeners need to hear about it. So, but let's start with the original story, which is
first off, I did
that
not.
You were there and what happened, and then we'll go to the backstory.
Okay, I did not avoid an ambush. I drove through an ambush that was set up, waiting for Americans to drive by to shoot at. I am almost certain that what happened was, in an ambush, ambush is set along a road. All the bad guys are on one side of the road, unlike in Hollywood where they shoot it, have a circular firing squad.
And what was the terrain?
Hilly and elephant grass. This is in Vietnam in 1970.
How tall?
This was elephant grass about 10 feet tall. This was on Route 13 out near the fishhook-shaped portion of the border between Cambodia and Vietnam. So I was riding in a Jeep with my platoon sergeant driving. I was a communications platoon leader of a mixed heavy artillery battalion, and one of our fire bases, Firebase Wade, was at Loc Ninh, which was out 5 kilometers from the Cambodian border. And this was what we called Indian country. This is where there were a lot of bad guys because we allowed them at that time to have a sanctuary in Cambodia. They would have all their stuff over there, and it would be like almost out in the open.
Indian country.
Indian country.
Sounds politically correct.
I'm sure that was the intent when they came up with it.
Safer than bat country.
I tell you also that the around each base there was like a berm, and then there was barbed wire and stuff. And the key phrase of the war was "gooks in the wire," meaning we're under attack.
More political correctness.
Yeah, so yes. We were big on political correctness back then.
It's factually accurate that that's what they called it back then.
So you were passing this elephant grass, had a sense something was up.
Well,
got to the base you were heading to.
You're telling a punchline here. Me and the guy are in a Jeep. It's broad daylight. The only time we were allowed on the road. You're normally supposed to be in a convoy. For some reason, my battalion commander just sent me 60 miles on this road in a Jeep with my officers can't drive. We're like rich people. We have to have a chauffeur. So the
spared no expense.
Yeah. So the platoon sergeant, I was a first lieutenant. He was a
so they would have sent you solo, but the rules say
exactly
you have to have a driver.
Exactly. An officer, even a lieutenant, is not allowed to touch a steering wheel. He can come to work in his own car, but he can't drive in the military. So we're going 60 miles on Route 13. By the way, Route 13 is the same road where a similar thing happened to Robin Williams' character in the movie Good Morning America, or Good Morning Vietnam. Good Morning Vietnam. That was Route 13, and he's going down that road being driven by a sergeant. Now he was like a corporal or something, Robin Williams, but. And that was supposedly a true story. He's driving down the road, and he's buddies with a Vietnamese guy in a restaurant back in Saigon. And all of a sudden, out on this Route 13, and they were in an area with trees and stuff, this South Vietnamese guy steps out of the jungle in front of him and stops him. He says, "Turn around and go back." He was warning him of an ambush. In other words, his buddy he saw in the restaurant every day in Saigon was Viet Cong. But he didn't want Robin Williams killed.
Gotcha.
So
all right, well,
and I talked to the actual guy that Robin Williams was playing. I had correspondence with him.
We have gotten spectacularly
off
track.
Yeah, we need to get back to your story.
And I got to finish this. He said, I told him I said, like you, I also went on Route 13 in a Jeep, and I don't think the people who sent me there wished me well. And he said, that's the only thing in the movie that was not true. He said, I'm quite interested to hear that it actually happened to you. So anyway, this is Route 13, and we got out near the Cambodian border. So it's a 60-mile drive, and we're near the end of it. And it's hilly, so sometimes you can't see squat in the elephant grass when you're down in a gully. It's 10 feet tall, and it's like a 2-lane dirt road. But you can reach out when you drive by. You can reach out with your hand and touch it, and it's impenetrable. You can't see in it.
Right.
So I had a bad feeling, like a sixth sense, like when you're in a big city and all of a sudden you start thinking You need to cross to the other side of the street, that kind of thing. Sixth sense. So anyway, when we went up over a hill, we could see out over the top of the elephant grass. And there were these platforms. And each one had a South Vietnamese soldier with a rifle standing on it, I guess to protect the road. And South Vietnamese soldiers always had a deer in headlights look on their face to me. And
for certain listeners, these are the friendlies.
Yeah, they call them ARVNs, Army of the Republic of Vietnam. They're South Vietnamese. They're wearing our uniforms, so they had our round helmets and our olive drab clothes, and they had our rifles, the M16. So I'm looking out and seeing these guys on the platforms, and I'm thinking, well, that's sort of comforting, although I don't know how much you could accomplish standing on a platform in 10-foot high elephant grass. It could be like a battalion of enemy in the grass. You couldn't see them. And then I started looking at their faces. They were maybe 50, 60 yards away, but you could see their faces. And they did not have a look of a deer in headlights. They had a look I had seen on a North Vietnamese prisoner of war. And I hardly ever hear people talk about it, but from our perspective in Vietnam, that seemed like a race war, not on our part, but on the enemy's part. Like they were all Vietnamese, and they hated us, was my impression, because we were Caucasians. And I remember this one POW was being guarded by a South Vietnamese guy, and he was filling sandbags or something. And he looked at me. I had nothing to do with the guy. I didn't know him. He looked at me like he wanted to kill me right then and there. I have never had anybody look at me like that. So I'm going over these hills on this road, and I look out, and I see these South Vietnamese uniformed guys standing there looking back at me like that POW. So I'm thinking, how hard would it have been for them to sneak up to each of these platforms?
Instead of the expected deer in headlights.
And suddenly get a drop on the guy and tell him to get off and take his clothes off. And maybe kill him, maybe take him prisoner. So they looked like North Vietnamese to me, wearing our uniforms. Anyway, I'm driving along and I'm thinking, we were talking, and we just stopped talking. We both simultaneously were creeped out. So I had a .45 automatic pistol on my holster, but didn't have any bullets in it. And I had 2 magazines. So I took one of the magazines, cocked it back, slammed the magazine in the bottom of the handle, and cocked it again to put one bullet in the chamber. And I put it back in the holster, thinking, what the hell am I going to do with this thing? It's accurate to about 40 feet or something.
Automatic pistol?
Semi-automatic. Every time you pull the trigger, a bullet shoots. But these guys standing on the platforms are holding M16s, which is an assault rifle. It's automatic, fully
Superior
automatic.
firepower.
Yeah. Plus, they didn't look like they were Americans, so I'm having a suspicion that there's more of them than the ones on the platform. So anyway, we continued through, uneventful, scared, but nothing happened. And we get to Firebase Wade, which is a little circle. It's a berm, dirt pushed up in a pile about 10 feet high by bulldozers, and then barbed wire around it. And then they have a little entrance with a kind of a sign above you when you drive through, welcome to Firebase Wade, home of the professionals, or some nonsense like that. So these guys look at us like we're ghosts. And they're, how'd you get here? And I said, well, considering we're in a Jeep and there's only one road in this freaking whole area, we drove. What was this a trick question? And they said, what about the ambush? And we said, what ambush? And they said, and lock. And I said, well, we just drove through there 15, 20 minutes ago. We didn't see any ambush. And I said, when did it happen? They said 10 minutes ago. So apparently behind us was a convoy, an American convoy of multiple trucks and Jeeps and, bringing supplies, replacements, ammunition, food, mail, all that kind of stuff. Routine convoy. We didn't know it was there. We might have slowed down to join it for safety reasons. So, and
if you had known about it, you would have, but you didn't.
Yeah, we should have been in a convoy. It was standing operating procedure in Vietnam. You're only supposed to go on the roads in a convoy, especially in Indian country. But we were told to go just in our lone Jeep. So I suddenly realized that I think they were hoping something bad would happen to me, the battalion commander, because I did not get along with them. And they overdid it. They put me in a Jeep with one guy, And an ambush, the way an ambush works, whether you're North Vietnamese or American Rangers or whatever, you got a whole bunch of guys in the kill zone with some machine guns. They also have claymore mines, which is a slab of plastic explosive where one side of it is all steel balls. So when it goes off, it's like a huge shotgun. And then, so the ambush, the kill zone would be maybe 30, 40 yards long. And then way out on either side, the left and the right, there's a guy we call flank security in Ranger School. He's got a radio, and he's watching the road. And he tells the commander of the ambush, who also has a radio, who's in the middle of the ambush kill zone, he tells him, here comes a Jeep with a first lieutenant, Trung Nguyen in Vietnamese, and a sergeant first class, and the Jeep has no radio antennas. So I think it's almost certain that the North Vietnamese ambush commander decided, I'm not wasting an ambush, a broad daylight ambush where the noise of it is going to cause Americans to start calling for helicopters and stuff. And we got to DD Mao out of here. That means run fast. The reason we didn't get killed or captured is because probably it was not a lucrative enough target. You're not going to waste an ambush on one Jeep with a first lieutenant and a sergeant. So apparently that later, the flag security guy said, here comes a convoy, 4 deuce and a halves, 2 3/4-ton trucks, 3 Jeeps, and some of the deuce and a halves are towing a towed vehicle. So they decided, apparently, that they would use the ambush on that group, and they set it off, and the guys at Firebase Wade said the radios exploded with calls for help from the convoy. Had it been us that they used the ambush on, there would have been no call. We had no radio.
And you didn't hear the ambush?
No, we didn't hear it. We didn't see it. Nothing. But the radios erupted with calls for help,
right.
and then you get all the artillery units and all the air support units, the Phantom jets and the UE helicopters, the gunships and all that. They start coming to the rescue.
Right. So you arrive, they're looking at you like your ghosts, tell you about the ambush, and how'd you react?
I couldn't stop laughing because I realized...
Normal response to getting such news.
I don't... Well, you behave oddly in a combat zone in many instances because of... You're juxtaposing life and death with stupidity and stuff like that. And I think my battalion commander was probably hoping something like that would happen. My sergeant...
I was going to say, this sounds like officer privilege or something, because your sergeant that drove you had a different reaction.
The sergeant that drove me freaked out. I think we both realized simultaneously what had happened, that they're sending us...
You laughed and he cried.
He didn't cry, but he was like beside himself. He was really agitated. So the next day, we didn't really have any reason to be there. I was sent there constantly. Like every time I would go there and come back, they would tell me to go out again. We had 2 other batteries that were in safer areas. I was never sent to those. Anyway, I think we both simultaneously realized the battalion commander and Lieutenant Reed don't get along, and this is a little maybe he'll get killed or captured exercise. And the sergeant, he got along fine with everybody, but they didn't care. I had to have a driver. If I'm going to war as hell, I need somebody to drive me because I'm a lieutenant. I don't drive. I have people. So he freaked out.
It's a strange punishment, sending you on that road, but with a driver.
It's
like,
not,
it's like being told to run suicides, but you're being carried by someone of a lower rank.
Yeah, on a sedan chair,
Right.
but anyway, it's not so strange in the military. It is common in the military in war to send people you don't like to the front. I had been warned at my previous unit, where I also didn't get along with the battalion commander. They say
get along with the battalion commander?
In World War II, they say he fought with Eisenhower, he fought with Patton, he fought with Bradley. He didn't get along with anybody. But anyway, no, they wanted their asses kissed, and I don't do that. And they wanted false documents signed, and I don't do that. Anyway, I was told by my peers in my previous unit, Jack, we agree with you. We admire your moral courage, but it's not worth it, and we're afraid for your safety. Well, who put them up to that? Fellow lieutenants, a lot of them draftees, are going to be in the Army 2 years. Who put them up to that? So anyway,
so the sergeant, you'd said the sergeant was a sole surviving son, but he
Well,
chose to stay in Vietnam.
We went back the next day. We drove back the 60 miles through the Indian country again. There's only one road.
But during the potential ambush, he fit that description already, right? But he chose to be there anyway.
Let me tell you the way I found out what happened. We drive back to our base camp in a place called Phu Loy, and I get out of the Jeep and I wash my face or something. I did whatever you do when you get out of a Jeep after 60 miles on a dirt road in Vietnam. And one of my platoon, I was a platoon leader. One of the platoon members, one of my Spec 4s or something, corporal, came up to me and said, Sergeant so-and-so, the platoon sergeant, is gone, sir. And I said, no, he's not gone. We were out at Wade. We just got back. He said, no, sir, he's gone. I said, what are you talking about? And he said, he invoked sole surviving son, sir. A helicopter has already taken him. He's on his way home to the States. The sole surviving son is a law, and it says, if you are the sole surviving son in a family that had another son or more than one son killed in a war, you don't have to serve in combat. So you don't have to go there, and if you choose to go there and you change your mind while you're there, you immediately leave. A lot of times in the Army, most of the time, when you want to, you put in papers to do something, it takes months because everything's got to be processed and it's bureaucratic and all that. With sole surviving son, they don't want the guy to invoke it and then get killed while he's waiting for the Army's bureaucratic paperwork. So apparently they treat it like a wounded soldier. And they sent a medevac chopper. And this was like 40 minutes after we got back. He's gone. He's not driving me down that road again. And the new sergeant.
And that's like the Saving Private Ryan plot line.
Yeah, it's exactly. Except Private Ryan.
It took longer for them to get him out.
Private Ryan didn't invoke it. I think the plot line there in Private Ryan was the guy would have invoked it if he had known his brother died, but his brother had just died and he didn't know yet.
Yeah, they sort of invoked it for him.
The plot line.
He had like 6 brothers that had all died, so they were going to save him.
Yeah, the plot line of Saving Private Ryan is absurd compared to reality. That's not if there was such a guy, they're chasing after him. They had a little patrol trying to find him. What you do is you get on the radio and say, "Tell Ryan to go back to the rear."
That's not as interesting a movie, though.
Yeah.
And if you're gonna do one of the many movies where we spend countless dollars trying to retrieve Matt Damon, you got to make the plot line more interesting.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you the epilogue of this. So the platoon sergeant invokes sole surviving son. He's on his second tour in Vietnam. He's a career sergeant. He never invoked sole surviving son before. I think the battalion commander got a little freaked out about that. Like that did not look good. When a career guy, well, it might not help. It might embarrass. Somebody might ask him what's going on, and they're very skittish about their career. So apparently this was not
skittish about their pension.
Not their pension. No, about their promotions. The pension is kind of locked in. Anyway, I get a new platoon sergeant. The new platoon sergeant is from Corps Artillery. This is my battalion commander's boss. And they send me to they keep sending me out to Firebase Wade. But they don't have me driven by my platoon sergeant anymore. Because this guy has friends back at the Corps Artillery. So the new trick is the battalion commander went to all the batteries every day in a Loach, which is a 4-seater helicopter. It looks like a big teardrop. So we get in a Loach. There's a pilot on the left front. The battalion commander's in the right front. I'm in the left rear. Nobody's in the right rear. We fly out to the 3 fire bases. Wade is the last one out by the Cambodian border. And then the battalion commander starts heading for the chopper to come back to the battalion headquarters. And I follow along. He said, where are you going? And I said, with you. Get on the chopper, go back to Phu Loy. He said, no, you stay here and fix the communications problems. I said, there aren't any. He said, well, you stay here and fix them anyway. So the next day, he comes back, but he's not going to give me a ride. So by then, he admitted the problems, the non-existent problems were fixed. So I had to hitchhike on that 60-mile road back to Phu Loy. And what I figured out is they would send a little convoy out of Wade every day because they had to send guys that were going home. Every day somebody's going home and somebody else is arriving in Vietnam. So they had to send the the short timers back. They got to go pick up the replacements, and they got to do the food and the mail and all that stuff. So I would get into the convoy, hop into one of the vehicles, drive through that ambush zone, and go to, I think it was Tay Ninh, the Big Red One or something. I forget the units and the exact name. So I went to some base where they were going to get their supplies and stuff. It was a substantial base, like a division, like 15,000 men. So there, I tried to hitch rides on Chinook helicopters one day, the first day, and they kept saying no. So after a day of getting sandblasted by these huge Chinook helicopters and the dirt and the stones are kicking up, I go back to where I'm staying and, staying with some just miscellaneous guys who let me sleep in their barracks. And I explained the problem. They said, oh, you got to get orders cut to get, you trying to fly to Long Ben? I said, yeah. They said, well, we'll cut your orders tomorrow. You're not in our unit, but we'll cut orders saying you are required to go to Long Ben. So they would cut me orders. And it was like a little airport, a little waiting room and everything. And you go in there and you go up to the counter and you show them your orders. And they say, well, we'll put you on this flight. And you hop on like a Huey helicopter. It's the iconic Vietnam helicopter with the whoomp, whoomp, whoomp. So that flies me to Long Ben, but I'm still not back. Then my battalion, they were sending convoys every day from Phu Loy to Long Ben. So I would go find one of those and go back with them. It took me 3 days. So then when I got back, the battalion commander the next day tell me to get in a helicopter to go to Fire Base Wade again, and he would leave me there, and then I would have to hitchhike back. So, but there were no more ambushes. Around that time, we invaded Cambodia, which was a magnificent thing. During my tour in Vietnam, I heard outgoing artillery on almost a daily basis where we're shooting at the enemy. And I heard incoming Katyusha rockets about monthly. They used to like to rocket us at 6 a.m. on payday because there would be a lot of guys standing in line outside, and they figured the rockets weren't very accurate. They would hit the base, but they couldn't aim them more than that. So the 6 a.m. on payday, everybody's standing in lines outside. Here comes the 3 rockets. So, but after we invaded Cambodia, and my unit was part of that, we moved our other 2 batteries up closer to Cambodia. After we invaded Cambodia, I never heard another shot fired my entire tour in Vietnam by our side or the other side. So that was extremely effective. And what it did is it turned the Indian country into a pleasant drive.
You didn't have a comparable name for it after that?
No, we still called it Indian country, but the Indians had departed because of the invasion of Cambodia. When I was talking to one of my West Point classmates, on that drive, there was an old French rubber plantation, and they had a clay tennis court in the front yard. So here you are, you're in your combat zone, and people are trying to ambush you and kill you and all this. And you're driving along, and here's this white mansion. There's a rubber tree plantation, I think, and there's this incongruous clay tennis court in front of the house. So we used to drive by. So it's, the war is a strange thing, and you see a lot of juxtapositions in war that are quite weird. There's a lot of people listening to this probably in Vietnam went on that highway and they remember that tennis court as well.
Yeah, so you had mentioned that you were sent down that road for punishment, and there's a backstory to that involving dinner.
Yeah, we had a mess hall, and there was an officer table, big long table for the officers, and a big area for the enlisted men. And I ate breakfast and lunch there at the officers.
And you're one of the bourgeois officers.
Yeah, well, we were the officers.
Around and
the officers, most of the officers, I was like the only West Pointer. Most of and West Point has a certain size. It puts out like 1,000 officers a year now. I think when I was a cadet, it was 700. Anyway, the Army, there was 2 million men in the Army when I was in. Just the Army, not the military. And the vast majority of the officers were OCS and ROTC. Mostly OCS, I think. So there's all these OCS, ROTC guys and me, the West Pointer. And I would eat breakfast with them and lunch with them. And initially, I ate supper with them. But the battalion commander would take this tour every day on his helicopter, 7 days a week. And the supper was cooked and ready at 6 p.m. But he wouldn't get there till 7. So
6 sharp, and the cooks left.
Yeah, they had the civilian Vietnamese had to leave the post before dark.
Cooks.
Yeah, the cooks and the waitresses. They had to leave our base before dark by rule. They come in every morning in daylight, and then they would leave before dark. So they would serve the meal and cook it and serve it at 6 p.m., 1,800 hours. And the officers wouldn't get the food until the battalion commander arrived. And he would always arrive at 7. And we had a briefing at 7:30.
And he knew the food was ready at 6.
I don't know for sure. It could have and should have.
You would think somebody would have told him.
Yeah, the XO, Battalion XO should have told him. He should have called ahead and said, "Oh, I'm going to be late again. Go ahead and eat without me." But he didn't. And one night...
And this was every day, pretty much.
7 days a week. He was
late.
100%. Yeah. 100%. One day, and I was one of the few guys, Americans in Vietnam, who could speak Vietnamese. I took like an adult education course in it over there. And I'm good at languages. So anyway, I said to the waitress at like 6:05, "Would you please bring me my meal?" And she said to me, and we're having a conversation that the other guys can't understand. And she says, "Oh, you don't want to do that. You'll ever get in trouble with the battalion commander." And I said, "Yeah, I do want to do it. Please bring me my food." So they brought my food and only my food. And all the other officers looking at me. So I ate my hot meal. And everybody's glaring at me, especially the XO. So I figured, this is ridiculous. And this is my food. It's part of my pay.
And the XO outranks you, but doesn't tell you to stop or anything.
No, he didn't tell me to stop, but he would refer to it in paperwork later as the I forget his name. It was like the eating alone incident or something. Anyway, so I decided after that one night when I'm getting all these looks that they had a little officers club at Phu Loy. Tiny little officers club, about the size of a living room. And they had a menu, and on that menu they had fried chicken and steak. So I would go there every night thereafter, take a book to read, be there all by myself. I would pay for the meal out of my pocket, even though I could get a free meal at the mess hall. But so I would have fried chicken one night, steak the next, fried chicken, steak. So this, I think, is the reason why they kept sending me out to Firebase Wade.
So now you were eating your meal at the officers club and then showing up for the briefing.
Oh yeah,
at 7:30.
Yeah, I'm part of the briefing. I'm the combo officer, so I have to tell them what the status is of the radios and the telephones and the repairs of the broken stuff every night. I was part of. It was like everybody in the unit would stand up, and one guy's talking about operations, one guy's talking about personnel, another guy's talking about the mess hall. I don't know. It was all each guy who was a subordinate leader to the battalion commander would speak, and the battalion commander is in the audience, and he's firing tough questions. Every time we had a radio repair, I would tell him about a radio repair where we had to requisition parts. He said, "What's the requisition number on that part?" At West Point, they had a rule, and he's implying that I'm lying, that we didn't really requisition a part. So I always had the part number. At West Point, they had a rule. If an officer ever accuses a cadet of lying, an investigation will ensue. If the cadet is found to be lying, the cadet leaves West Point. If the cadet is not found to be lying, the officer leaves West Point. So that rule didn't apply in the Army. But that was the nature of the briefing, Mr. Tough Guy.
So you ate at the officers club?
Breakfast and lunch. Every day.
Well, and then dinner.
Initially. I stopped eating there for dinner because of I didn't want to wait till 7. I figured, who cares?
You mean the mess hall?
Yeah, I wanted a hot meal. Everybody else getting cold food.
You ate breakfast and
plus, I wanted to start.
Where did you eat breakfast?
In the mess hall, the same exact place. I wanted to eat a hot meal and then have some time to gather my stuff for the briefing.
Right.
The other guys are eating a cold meal at 7. The briefing's at 7:30, so they're rushing through the cold meal so that they can go do their little preparation. And everybody's just sitting there looking at each other for the hour between 6 and 7. We just sat there and did nothing while the enlisted men are eating their hot meals.
So ultimately, you're skipping this staring session to go eat your own dinner. You're paying
out of my pocket. Yeah.
And for this crime, you're sent down a road in a Jeep every day.
Not every day.
Not
every day. I would say weekly, maybe twice a week.
Okay.
And let me tell you something. I'm a platoon leader in this battalion. I have a radio squad, and these are guys that operate FM radios in the Tactical Operations Center, which is underground bunker. FM radios are the typical radios you see on an Army Jeep or something. So that's one of my squads. The battalion commander sees them every day. They're right out in the open. Another squad I had was a wire squad. These are the guys who operate the switchboard. So we had the black Bakelite telephones on everybody's desk, and you pick them up and you get an operator, like the old days in the United States. It's one of my platoon members. And he says, who do you want to call, sir? And they tell him, and he plugs the jack in, those guys did such a great job, and I didn't have anything to do with it. They did such a great job. The battalion commander was always complaining about everything. He never complained about the wire squad because it was like a really good referee in a football game where you don't even know he's there. He's doing a good job, but you don't know he's there.
Right.
So these guys they did their job so well that the complainers wouldn't even complain about the wire squad because they kind of didn't perceive their existence.
Right.
And the wire squad, there's a bunch of guys sitting in a room over next to my office. And they always had a dog. The guy that was running the switchboard always had a dog in his lap. So, every time I walked through the room, I said, hey, guys, keep up the good work. So that was one of my squads. My other squad was a repair squad. These are some guys who would fix broken telephones and broken radios. These guys are all at Fuloy. So when I go to Firebase Wade or the other fire bases, there's nobody out there who's in my platoon. I'm not the leader of those people. Their chain of command they had a commo sergeant in each battery, and his boss was like the battery commander or maybe the platoon leader in charge, whatever they call it in the artillery of the communications and personnel and so forth. And anyway, they all worked for the battalion commander, essentially. They didn't work for me. With regard to Firebase Wade, I was an advisor. I was like a communications expert, but the people in charge of communication out there were the commo sergeant and his squad.
Right, so you're being sent out to places where you don't have any men. You're supposed to be leading them.
Well,
they're not even there. They're not even there.
I have men. I had like 35 guys.
Correct.
They're back in Fuloy.
Right, and you're being sent off to be punished, not because you're doing a bad job, but because you're not, during meal hours, you're not doing what the crowd is doing, essentially.
That is my...
Not showing sufficient...
That's my mind reading. I suspect the battalion commander would have a different story. But I wouldn't, that's common. I read the book Killing Patton by Bill O'Reilly. And Patton apparently was having a sexual affair with his niece when he was in Europe. And
well, hold on. Can't just skip over that.
Well, maybe we can.
I can. I mean, that's what the book said, and the book is, super researched. And this is I think I'd heard it before.
Okay.
Anyway, the niece became interested in a young officer, romantically interested. Patton shipped him to the front lines. The niece was over there like a Red Cross girl or something, and they're not on the front lines. So this officer that she became interested in, Patton reassigned him to the front line, where A, he's not near the niece anymore, and B, you're allowed to get yourself killed or captured up there. So it's a fairly common thing, and I was threatened with it at my previous battalion. Lieutenant Reed, you need to start playing the game like everybody else. You're nobody special, and then my peers would say, "Hey, Jack, we're concerned about your physical safety." Who put them up to that? They don't dream stuff like that up.
Due to your defective attitude.
Defective attitude. Yeah. Well, then when I went back, at some point they kept sending me out to Firebase Wade. Firebase Wade is a fire base, as in boom. These are 175 millimeter cannons, self-propelled howitzers, great big long barrel. It's on a tank with no turret. Instead of a turret, they have this huge barrel, and then they have 8-inch howitzers and 175 millimeter. And every night they would fire. They're not supposed to fire them unless they have a confirmed target, but they did anyway because they wanted their bar chart back at Corps headquarters to have as many rounds or more rounds as the other battalions. So they're blasting away with these things in this little circle that's maybe 40 yards across, 50 yards across. So I remember the gun would go off and it would push the ground down, and you and your cot would be in midair, and you would fall down. But I got used to it. You could sleep through it. But I realized at one point, hey, I have a high-frequency hearing loss, and I have a profile in my personnel records, which is a piece of paper that says don't assign this guy around loud noises, although this doesn't mean he can't be in combat. So we weren't in any combat. We were just shooting into the night. So anyway, I invoked, I didn't invoke sole surviving son because my two brothers were still alive, but I invoked high frequency hearing loss, so I'm not supposed to be around loud noises. They immediately send me away to Corps headquarters, where they made me the assistant signal officer. And I don't think the guy I was assistant to was authorized to have an assistant. But they had a dining hall that I went to for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Okay.
So you escaped this commander that had been sent.
Yeah, but I didn't escape. I didn't escape the officers' table at the dining hall. So now, and this was in a building that they called the officers' club. So I refused to join. Everybody's required to join the officers' club. It was my standard policy when I was in the Army not to join. So I didn't join the officers' club. But I went there for breakfast, lunch, and dinner because that meal was paid for by the United States Army. When you're in combat, you get free food. Okay, free room and board.
Ooh, quite the perk.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's my meal.
Free healthcare too.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it was socialist paradise. So I'm eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner at the officers' table, the long officers' table, just like in Fuloy, much longer table. So then one night the movie MASH came, and the movie MASH was so anti-military that at first the military wasn't going to allow us to see it, but there was a big uproar, and we got free movies. Free first-run movies. So then the officers watched separately from the enlisted men. The enlisted men are only useful for driving jeeps. We don't want to hang around with them. So they put me, I went to the officers club that night. It's only one night, one screen. So I went to the officers club to watch it. And the officers said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I'm here to watch a movie, sir." They said, "You're not a member." And I said, "Well, sir, I don't think the officers club paid for the movie. I think the movie's like my food. It's for everybody. But you won't join the officers club. You're not allowed to watch here. Get out of here." So okay. So I went over to the enlisted men. They had a big parachute tent pie, and like an amphitheater outdoors, and I watched it there. But then sergeants there were giving me crap because I was an officer. I wasn't supposed to be hanging around with the enlisted men. And I said, "Well, they wouldn't let me watch it in the officer club, so I'm going to watch it here. It's going to be gone tomorrow, and I haven't got time to go see if I could find some other officers' mess hall." You would see all these buildings.
Just go on Fandango and see where else.
Theaters
it's playing.
There's buildings all around, but it's dark. It's nighttime, and it's not that you're going to get shot, but you have to go to a building. You don't know whether it's a latrine or the enlisted men's barracks or whatever. It would have taken me a considerable amount of time.
Didn't have a guy wandering the streets filling oil lamps?
Yeah, well, I would have had to find another officer's mess somewhere that had the movie, and they would let me watch there. And I didn't have time for it, so I just watched it at the... I stood in the back at the enlisted thing. I wasn't schmoozing with the enlisted men or being friends with them. Anyway...
God forbid.
Yeah, you really got that disdain ingrained. Enlisted.
Yeah, I really despise that. And they had to salute us and call us sir and all that stuff. I think that stuff is an anachronism. But we had an incident. One night I went to the officers club to eat dinner, which they allowed me to do. I wasn't allowed to watch a movie, but I could eat dinner. And it seemed like it was like fancier than normal. And it was a steak. And the waitress came and asked me how I wanted my steak. And I always talk Vietnamese to the Vietnamese people. And so I'm sitting there chatting away, and there seemed to be, it was like something was going on, some kind of a big deal. But nobody told me there was a big deal going on. I just sensed it. So anyway, I get a note passed to me by the company commander of the company I'm in. And it says, "This is an officers club meal. The officers club paid for the steaks. You're not a member." So I read that. I called the waitress over. In Vietnamese, I told her, "Never mind, I'm not going to eat here." I got up. I left. People were doing that to go to the men's room. So I guess they figured that was what I did. So I went to my hooch, got my Time magazine or whatever, went over to the real officers club that was open to everybody. It was just a restaurant. And this place had a menu. They had like 40 items on the menu. This is a great place. They had entertainment on Friday and Saturday. So I sat down there, paid for the meal out of my pocket. And when I got back the next, like an hour later, "Where were you? What are you doing?" I said, "What do you mean?" The guy told me it was an officers club meal, and I hadn't paid for join the officers club, so I couldn't eat. He said, well, the Corps commander, 4-star General Julian J. Ewell, comes once a month, and he welcomes the new officers, and you were one of the officers to be welcomed. And I said, well, nobody told me any of this. They just told me you're not a member of the officers.
Get out, very passive-aggressively.
Well, the company commander didn't tell me to get out. He's just generally giving me crap. He knew I was going to be introduced. They had to go there was a stack of 4x6 cards where the 4-star general is going, and Lieutenant Reed has joined us, and they're very it's a schmoozing kind of thing. But I didn't have any clue what it was. So they had to get my card out of the stack before the guy stood up to do the remarks. Otherwise, he would have said, Lieutenant Reed is where's Lieutenant Reed? Where's Lieutenant Reed? Where's Lieutenant?
Who would have been in trouble on that one? You?
Well, and I got to tell you one more thing about that unit. When I first got to Vietnam, I was stationed at Long Binh, where we had hooches, and everybody had an air conditioner.
You say hooch like anyone knows what that means.
It was a wooden building with aluminum sheet metal on the outside, no insulation, in stinking hot Vietnam. I shared a bathroom with my West Point classmate, Ray Vinton. His room is on one side of the bathroom, I'm on the other. The bathroom only has a sink and a shower, and the shower is a 55-gallon drum on the roof. So you pull a chain, and the water comes down. And it was heated by the sun.
Very high
solar.
tech.
Solar.
Solar.
This is painted black and heated by the sun.
Ahead of your time.
But anyway, everybody had an air conditioner, a window air conditioner, but they were privately owned. So there was a West Point captain leaving, and I asked, could I buy his air conditioner? And that was what you did when you were leaving. You sold it to some new guy. I was a new guy. He was an old guy. He's leaving. So he sold it to me for $100. And I said, Captain, would you please give me a bill of sale? He said, what do you need that for? I said, sir, maybe I don't need it, but just the way the Army works, I've been around long enough to know that some bunch of assholes is liable to decide that they need the air conditioners for the officers' club or the general's office or something, and that anyone who has an air conditioner without a bill of sale, they could say, well, you stole it, and we're going to take it back. So he gave me a bill of sale. So then I get thrown out to the artillery unit, and I come back, and now I'm in the same general vicinity. And once again, I have a hooch. In the artillery unit, I slept in a barracks of officers down in an underground bunker. So I couldn't use the air conditioner, but I had it still. So I go back, and I install it in my hooch. And my roommate there, Larry Petco, another one of my West Point classmates, and he and I had nice air conditioning inside our little uninsulated hooch. So sure enough, one day, the Officers Club decided they needed more air conditioners. And all the officers, like me, had one. And they took everybody's air conditioner except mine. When they came for mine, they said, we're taking your air conditioner unless you have a bill of sale. And I got up my bill of sale, showed it to them, and they went off. So I was the only officer, the young officer in the battalion, the only junior officer in the battalion who got to keep his air conditioner.
Which I'm sure increased your popularity.
Yeah, very much.
It was further evidence of my defective attitude.
You had another one about getting sent up to the top of a mountain.
Nui Ba Din. Well, now we're back at the Phu Loi, the artillery battalion, and they're trying to think of ways to torment me. They're sending me out to.
What is their goal? Is it just to?
I don't know.
Try and get you in line, or just because they don't like you?
Like a wild horse that they're trying to break. So they kept taking me out to Firebase Wade, first in the Jeep and then in the helicopter. And we drove back and forth in the Jeep, and then with the helicopter, I had to hitchhike. Took 3 days. 1 day to go to Tay Ninh, 1 day to get to Long Binh, and 1 day to come to Phu Loi. So it didn't see. I think they felt it wasn't bothering me enough. I just got into it. It was I knew the guys. I'd get to Tay Ninh, and I'd go over to this particular unit where I knew, hey, I'm back again. Eating their mess hall and all that, and stay. Somebody would be on R&R, they let me sleep in his bunk. And it was, I get that. I need my orders. I go to the waiting room. Hey, Charlie, how you doing? So I got it down. So I had 2 guys in my platoon on top of Nui Ba Din Mountain, the Black Virgin Mountain. The terrain of Vietnam, generally in the area I was in, it's called Three Corps, is flatter than a pancake. And when you get to the Cambodian border, it starts to get hilly. Flatter than a pancake, and there's this one cone-shaped mountain, apparently an extinct volcano, called Nui Ba Din. So you just see flat, and then boom, there's this cone. There's another one called Nui Ba Ra that is north of there. Anyway, FM radios are line of sight. So it's like you're shooting a bullet. And Firebase Alpha, A battery and B battery were close to Fuloy, our battalion headquarters. So the FM radio could see that line of sight, and our antennas could see their antennas, through the jungle, but they could see them electronically. So we just talked to them on the FM radios normally. Firebase Wade was so far away, 60 miles away, that it was over the curvature of the Earth. So FM radios, the FM signal trying to go to Firebase Wade would just shoot into space over their heads. They wouldn't get it. So we had two guys on top of Nui Ba Din Mountain, which was like a company, 100 and some guys. 8 gazillion radios, like all the units in that area. They all had two guys up there. So what they would do when I arrived was they would call up when they wanted to talk to Firebase Wade, they would call up to the top of Nui Ba Din and say, we need to know how many rations Firebase Wade needs for tomorrow. And the guy on top would write it down, and then he would call Firebase Wade on another radio. So it's like going up to the top of the mountain, and now it's going down to Firebase Wade, because the FM radios on top of Nui Ba Din could see both Fuloy and Loch Ninh, because they're up so high, they're above the curvature of the Earth for certain distances. So they would say, they would call Wade and say, how many rations you need for tomorrow? And Wade would answer back, and they would write down the answer, and they'd call back down to Fuloy. We found out what the rations are. Here it is. So I thought this is stupid, where you call up and they write it down and they ask the question and then they write the answer down. And everybody keeps, it's like a party game where you're whispering something in everybody's ear. So I remembered there's a repeating device that automatically retransmits. So you would call Firebase Wade and you would speak to Firebase Wade. It goes to the top of the mountain and then back down on another frequency. And then it comes back on the other frequency and then on the first frequency. But I remember there was a device that I learned about in Signal Officers Basic. So I requested it. And they told me, you're not authorized to have one. And I said, we are in the exact situation for which this was devised. You're not authorized to have one. So I went to the S3. For some reason, I got along with S3s in the Army all the time. That's the operations officer. I went to the battalion S3, told him the situation. He said, let me make a few calls. This is the way the Army really works. The supply chain doesn't work. What he does is he calls a guy he went to Command and General Staff College with, who's in the supply thing. And so he got the device. So we sent it up there. They connected it. Boom, magic. There's still two guys up there, but they have nothing to do. All they do is make sure that there's a battery in the radio. So they decided, hey, here's an idea. Let's send Lieutenant Reed up to the top of Nui Ba Din Mountain. And that was pretty horrible. That would have been hard to get used to. So I go up there. There's a West Point captain, company commander up there. And he said, what are you doing here? And I said, well, they sent me up here. I said, I think they sent me here to torment me, but they claim that there's something wrong here that I need to fix. And he said, what's wrong? I said, nothing. So I had to sleep on the floor. He's got a cot, one of these canvas cots, kind of a fold.
Yeah, at the top of the mountain, you don't have this big base. It's this tiny little place.
No, it's like a submarine. 8 zillion antennas.
They don't got beds lying around for you.
No, when I went to Tay Nan, they would all find me a place to sleep, but not up on top of Nui Ba Din Mountain. So this miserable place. There's not a tree in sight. It's out in the hot sun, and although it's up at 4,000 feet or something, it wasn't cool. So I had to sleep on the floor next to the company commander's cot, and he has to avoid stepping on me when he gets up in the dark to go to the outhouse. And then they had rations up there. They had the mess hall like everybody does, but they don't have any for me. They had to everybody had to eat a little less so that I could have something, and or maybe somebody didn't like one of the dishes. Let me have his. So he said, "How long are you going to be here?" I said, "Sir, I think I'm here to be tormented. So I would guess forever." And he said, "This is no good. We don't have room up. There's not a hotel up here. This is not a tourist location." So I said, "Sir, we'd be glad for you to go up your chain of command and to get to the 4-star general. And he'll come back down the chain of command of my guy. That would be fine with me." He didn't want to stir that up. So I finally one day I said on the radio to Fuloy, "When I leave here, do you want me to bring back a such and such?" I think it was maybe the first radio. "Yes, we do." And I immediately got on a helicopter. And then they called back after I left saying, "Well, that doesn't mean we're letting you come back." And when I get on this helicopter, the helicopter doesn't have any seats for me either. I get on this Huey, And for some reason, they come flying in. These are driven by like 19, 20-year-old warrant officers. They come flying in. They're there for like 6 seconds, and then they blast off. So there's little hooks on the floor. They lay flat if we're tying cargo down. They lay flat like in a little depression, and if you want to use them, you have to pull them up, stand them up vertically. So I ended up with my fingers, my index fingers, in 2 of these loops that are on the floor because I couldn't get a seat. I didn't have any seatbelt. And if the helicopter takes off and immediately turns like sideways, so like I would have fallen out of the chopper onto the mountain, outside the barbed wire. So war is not what they depict in the movies. But I got back, and around then I figured out the profile thing, and that's when I was out of the unit.
I can't imagine why your articles on the military are so cynical. It seems like such a pleasant experience.
Well, it's a, I was a West Point graduate, airborne ranger. I volunteered for Vietnam. I volunteered for D Company 75th Rangers in the United States before I went to Vietnam. That's why I was in this unit, 2 Field Force. And bunch of BS. But my combat and my war experience was, I felt like I was a prisoner of war rather than helping to win. And I was assistant platoon leader in the 1st unit. I was a real platoon leader in the 2nd unit, but we didn't really have much to do. I mean, the men did what they needed to do. I was never there, but they still did a good job.
Right.
But they did. Military units, when you put a military unit in one place and keep it there forever, instead of like World War II where they're moving across Europe as they push the Germans back, you have too many staff. Because when it's like a circus. If the circus never moved, they could fire half the people that work there because they tear it down and put it up again. So my men did not need me
to do their job.
They did their job.
Right.
It was so routine. They were always in the same location. It was so routine. And we got the new platoon sergeant from Corps headquarters. There's a thing called a code room. They have another name for it. But anyway, the code room is secure like a vault. And there's all these procedures you got to follow strictly. And I didn't know anything about the code room. My job was battalion communications officer, and there's a school for battalion communications officers. And when I graduated from West Point, I was high enough in my class that I could choose the longer, more popular school called radio officer, which I did. And the guys at the bottom of the class, and maybe some of the guys who were extremely career-oriented, they had to go to commo officer school. So I avoided that school. But now I'm in the job that school would have taught me to do. So I didn't know much about this room. I didn't know anything about it. I knew it was there, but I didn't know there was a bunch of procedures that had to be followed. So one day, we got inspected by Corps headquarters. They inspected the code room, and we get the highest score in the history of the Corps. And the reason was my new platoon sergeant, not the sole surviving son. My new platoon sergeant, his previous job at Corps headquarters was to go around inspecting code rooms. And the code inspectors were his buddies.
You had a ringer.
Yeah. So the code inspectors who came to our unit were his buddies. And so they gave us the highest rating. And we probably deserved it. I mean, the guy knew exactly how to do all this. And the first thing he did when he got here, he didn't even tell me. He just went to code room and straightened it all out. And I never told the battalion commander. The sergeant major of the unit, like, he knew I was in trouble with the battalion commander. So sergeant major of the unit, the highest ranking sergeant, he said, "Sir, you need to tell the battalion commander about your code room rating in the briefing." I said, "No, he's interested. He can ask me and I'll tell him, but I'm not going to volunteer it." So I never told him.
Interesting stuff. I think a lot of these would be good in movies, especially the ambush with the POW facial look and stuff like that. But
that was creepy. There's a book called Sixth Sense about that kind of where you it's not just from seeing people's faces, but you just sense something wrong, something foreboding.
All right. Thanks for listening.